Tony D and Little Joan with a fun video. Well, all my videos are kind of fun, I hope. But this one's about the Pineys and the music I envision for the soundtrack. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. The links in the description. Speaking of my books, the Pineys, books 1 through 16, available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. So I'll put this on YouTube because I want everybody to know about some of this music that I put or that I envision in the books and in the scenes, because you never know. You never know what's gonna happen in the future. I'd like Hollywood to get the Pineys correct. One time, get something correct, Hollywood. Yeah, I like to think of various songs to inspire me when I'm writing chase scenes or action scenes and stuff. When you're doing that for a screenplay, or whether it's a screenplay or a book you imagine eventually becoming a screenplay, sometimes it's not good to put the specific name of the song as merely to suggest it. Kind of depends on the project. If it's a project you want to sell, you got to be more flexible. You can suggest a specific song and then say a song like this. So you pick a song, but the producers may not be able to access that music, and they'll have to find music that's similar, maybe not the same. Maybe they don't have access to it. Maybe they don't have the budget to rent that song, so to speak. You know, as I've said in the past, you should follow the books. If you're doing the movies based on my books, you should follow the books exactly. Why did I write the books if you're just going to change it? Oh, you know better? Oh, well, then you're an a-hole. You have to respect and look, there are plenty of movies made and books that I don't like, but I respect people for following the book, even if the book is terrible. And you might say, you look at a project like American Psycho, right? They say it's a terrible book, but an awesome adaptation of a terrible book. I don't know. I didn't read the book, but maybe that's true. But the problem is, I think most people in the movie industry, most people in filmmaking, they've got tremendous egos, and they really ought to keep them in check, I say. But anyhow, so here's some of the music I have for the soundtrack of the Pineys. The first would be the theme song, and you might find it pedestrian or weird or like, what? Like none of the music I picked is Piney music, although it would be in there in some form or another. I mean, you could put it in there in the credits and stuff. I figure that's the way it would be. It would just sort of be like atmosphere music. Piney music is very country kind of stuff, very sort of jug bandy stuff, most of it. I don't have any problem with it, but for like an action sort of sequence, ideally I would want to kick it up a bit of get something with a little more of an edge. My favorite song, and it would be the theme song for the Pineys, I would totally 100% option it if I had the money, would be Sabotage by the Beastie Boys. I know, a lot of you are saying, what? I never would have picked that song in a million years, but that's the song I like. I think it's the greatest song ever, so that's the song. That would be the theme song. So that would be the opening credits would be Sabotage. Then in book 1, there's a scene where Hemingway has to do a lip sync because his mother never supported him in high school, and there's a high school talent show, and the other relatives are going to that to see their kids perform, and Hemingway gets mad at his mother and says she never came to his high school events or talent show or whatever, and so she says go ahead, lip sync something now. So he lip syncs to Boston's More Than a Feeling. So that's in book 1. Book 2, and some of these songs are kind of like they'd probably be in more than one episode, actually. But songs like this, Donovan's Season of the Witch. So that's something, with Christy, Hemingway's mom, the witch. she would have songs like that. Season of the Witch. In book 5, the Eagles, Witchy Woman. There's all sorts of songs like that. I don't think I specifically mentioned them, but I found a list of 100 witch songs. I got to listen to some of them. Some of them sound pretty awesome. But definitely in book 5, there's a really obscure song, and I love this song. It's written by Barry White, and it's called Doing the Banana Splits. Now, as you may or may not know, I'm a huge fan of the Banana Splits. I loved them as a kid. You can't talk me out of that because it's one of those things I'm nostalgic for. But Barry White did one of the songs for the show, and it was called "Doing the Banana Splits." It's an awesome song. You should listen to it. That makes an appearance in the book, and like Hemingway knows it, of course, and then he explains it to Milton. Milton's like, "Oh, cool." In book 6, of course, one of the running gags, and this is a bit of a spoiler if you haven't read it yet, but one of the running gags is because of Bloody John Bacon, who's the villain in this one. He's sort of an undead pirate. Hemingway, back in the 80s, trapped Bloody John Bacon in the basement of the Cedar Bridge Tavern, the original one. And he stuck a tape on loop. And Bacon went nuts because it was just playing endlessly, and they had it like rigged so it would just keep playing, and the tape would flip and it would just play over and over again, and it was the best of Huey Lewis and the News. So it's like all their best songs. I like Huey Lewis and the News. I don't care what you say. And then at the end, when they re-trap him, Hemingway does a new version of "Hip to Be Square," and he sings it terribly to further torture Bloody John Bacon, who's trapped forever. In book 7, there's a reference to a song, and I may be missing some of my own references because I haven't reread a lot of them. I've got 16 books now. It's hard to remember it's getting harder and harder to remember stuff I wrote. But there's scenes when Hemingway was a younger guy, when he was in high school, and him and his girlfriend Darla are dancing to "Living in the 80s" by Killing Joke. Another awesome song from the 80s if you haven't heard of it. In book 8, another flashback to that era, 80s era with Hemingway. He's listening to his Walkman. He's listening to "Girls on Film" by Duran Duran. I don't know. I just picked that song at random. In the early books, it's mentioned in general that Hemingway does like punk music and listen to Black Flag and bands like that. Although I don't think I mentioned a specific song. Then in and I just remembered a song. And I'm trying to think what book I put it in. I might have to start this video over. What book did I put that in? Oh, gosh. You know what? It's in book 4. Okay, I just remembered. Okay, so in book 4, I'm going to write this down while I remember it. It's Anarchy in the UK. The Sex Pistols. Anarchy in the UK. Now, this one is not actually mentioned in the book, but what happens is there's a fight scene early in the book, and that's the song I imagine that would play, or at least part of it, during the fight scene. I think it's Anarchy in the UK. Yeah, it's one of the Sex Pistols songs. He beats up back in the 80s. Hemingway beats up a bunch of the Oosteds when their feud was still going on. All right, so yeah, I forgot that. I just remembered it. God, it's getting harder and harder to remember stuff as this. I really need a Wikipedia or something at this point. Another song. In book 9, there's a big fight scene at the end with the witches at the museum, and the song I imagine for that scene is called Tick Tick Boom by the Hives. Now, that's a more modern song. I think it's from the 2000s. It's pretty good if you haven't heard it. I really like that one. In book 10, that's the first short story book, Animal by Pearl Jam. And it's the werewolf story, the Kung Fu werewolf story, when they're fighting Milton and they're trying to trick him into the machine that'll cure him of being a werewolf. Book 11, of course, has a Rolling Stones song, and this is sort of a running gag I wrote in a comic one time, and I sort of rewrote it here for Hemingway. He starts playing the Rolling Stones, and Milton tells Lewis, as long as he doesn't play Rolling Stones, that's his car chase music. And he puts on Rolling Stones, and Lewis is like, "What? Why are you playing that?" And he puts on 19th Nervous Breakdown. So that's the song I imagine when they're fighting the devil that looks like Thomas Edison in the early scene in the book. This is sort of like the beginning of Act 2 when they're fighting him on the highway. With the limo. In book 12, this is the one takes place in Ong's Hat. There's a scene towards the end of the book where the characters, the Pineys, have to they basically have to try to get back to their own universe. And so that song would be that whole sequence would be Space Cowboy by the Steve Miller Band, which is a classic song. I love that song. I know a lot of these are old. You're saying, "Oh God," but I'm telling you, they're good songs. I mean, if you don't like rock, you probably won't like them, but whatever. In book 14, there's a really good song called "The Witch" by The Cult, and part of that, like the end part of that song, is like the chase at the end of the book. So that's what I imagine that for, and I would use it. I would probably sprinkle the other lyrics of the song, the earlier lyrics, throughout the episode, sort of in the background. It's a good song. It's kind of slow in the beginning, and then it gets really intense at the end. In book 15, that's the La Cosa Nostra Piney, there's a song by Cage the Elephant called In One Ear. It's a really good song. It's apropos of nothing, but again, it would be the big chase, the climactic chase at the end of the book. And then finally, book 16, which is another short story book. It's got a bunch of different stories and a bunch of different time periods. There's a story that takes place in the 70s on Mother's Day, and Hemingway has to save his mother, and during the car chase there, it's Respectable by the Rolling Stones, which is another great Stones song that I like. And I wanted to find one that a lot of the Stones songs sort of just fade, and I wanted to find one that kind of ends. And there's a bunch of others I have in mind for future stories and sequences and whatnot. But, you know, a lot of this is dependent upon what the studio is willing to spend in terms of money on the soundtrack. You know, a lot of these songs are very expensive because they've been used in other movies before, and in some ways they see them as a pointless expense, right? Because you're spending all this money to license a song that everybody over likes. I think, I mean, depending on the movie you watch, you know, a lot of these movies, they just, I don't know, they just don't play these songs anymore. I guess it's just, you know, they don't want to pay the royalties or whatever. I don't know why they don't just cut a deal. I mean, certainly, like, you know, for instance, the Beastie Boys, I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't want money. Unless they hated my books for some reason, but I love the Beastie Boys. So I'm thinking about another Beastie Boys song for book 17, actually, for one of the sequences. But yeah, some of these sort of inspire the action in my head when I'm thinking about the scene. I don't like action scenes with a lot of like grunting and no dialogue. If it's a scene like that, I want some music, some cool rock and roll behind it. I think that would be fun. I used to like in Scooby Doo when the gang would be chased by a ghost and they play like a cool song. It would be hippie music, but back then it was kind of cool. I just thought, oh wow, that's kind of cool. I like that song. I think one of the songs they used back in the day was Little Mary Sunshine. If you ever heard that song, I would throw that in just as a reference to that. That would be funny. Um, and I'm sure later I'll think of 2 or 3 songs that I mentioned in some of these books. But that's the soundtrack so far. And so I have a lot of these songs because I keep listening to them. When I'm writing the story, I'll listen to them over and over again to sort of just remind myself of the sequence of events, and I sort of in my own brain tie it into the song. I don't know if you guys do that, but that's kind of what I do. So these are some of the songs. So if you want to check them out, you never heard them before. I mean, a lot of them are common, but I have a very pedestrian taste in music. I think you would say, I don't know, some of these are kind of cool songs. It depends on how old you are, really, and when you listen to music. Like my music listening days are mostly behind me, in terms of, like, when you're young, you tend to listen to music and, like, it's super important to you. It's super important to have, like, the right song, the right time. Like, these days, I just put on music. I put on, like, a lot of, because you just have heard it all. And there's some music you've heard too much. Like, there's certain songs I can't even listen to anymore. I can't listen to Bruce Springsteen, especially anything from the 80s. They just overplayed it. Bon Jovi, same thing. I was never a fan of either one of them, but I can't take it. So a lot of people probably say, why don't those guys ever get mentioned? Like, why don't those? I hope they never. I hope the people making the Pineys movies, if I'm not around, God forbid, I'm never gonna die, but I mean, something could happen. Maybe I'll be shot into space or something. But I wouldn't want them to just use Bruce Springsteen and Bon Jovi music just because it's from New Jersey. Even the Bruce Springsteen Jersey Devil song, which is okay. It's a very obscure cut, but it's okay. Because I don't know, it's just the wrong vibe. And one of the other songs too is "Stairway to Heaven," Led Zeppelin, "Stairway to Heaven." God, I just don't want to listen to that song, because back in the day, in the early '80s, they'd play that song literally every day. There was a radio station, I think, played it all day during a certain time of year. That literally just played all day. It was like that radio station that played the Afro Man song for 24 hours straight because everybody kept requesting it. It was like that. Although I still like the Afro Man song, just because it's funny. You literally couldn't turn on a radio without hearing the "Stairway to Heaven" song at one point in our nation's history. Anyhow, that's my take on music with the Pineys. I just thought it would be a cool aside. Just trying different videos at this time. So tomorrow's Christmas. Have a great Christmas, everybody. Nobody ever says that. Everybody argues like, do you say happy holidays or Merry Christmas? I say have a great Christmas. Get lots of presents. Again, connect with your family, connect with your friends. Don't be alone if you can help it. If you're in a bad situation, try to call somebody. Try to open yourself up a little bit. I know sometimes it's tough, but make an effort to get out there. Maybe you brighten somebody else's day. Maybe you meet a new person if you're that lonely or isolated for some odd reason. Anyhow, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow on Christmas.